Peter Arcese is the Forest Renewal BC Chair of Applied Conservation Biology in the Department of Forest and Conservation Sciences and the Faculty of Forestry at UBC. So we just need to get ourselves set up here. Let me do this for you.
Thanks very much for having me. What a lovely crowd to have here. And it's very nice to be your guest. I would just say that although I'm not a resident of Cowichan, I'm a resident of, the Georgia Basin for my whole life. I'm 62 in 2 days, and I've been counting birds and surveying plants and seeing other wonderful things through the Sansom Narrows for many, many years now, and have enjoyed the forests, and I hope I can pay back a little bit. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story about loss in the area first, losses which you fear, but also losses which you already experienced, because I think it's really important to know what we've lost, to know how to make decisions now going forward. And so I'm going to tell you a story about, nothing about trees, I'm going to tell you about a story about basking sharks, because many of you won't know that in the 1950s, we had 400 animals that were 12 to 20 meters long, clogging Nanaimo Harbor. And when people came back from World War II to fish, that was a problem because they got tied up in nets. And so we decided that in 1949, basking sharks were pests. Other places in the world now, people are making millions of dollars out of having people swim with them or kayak with them, the very few places they're left. But we were probably one of the world centers of them. We decided because they were problems that we were going to get rid of them. So after declaring them pests, we fitted a Coast Guard cutter in the area with a large knife, and we sliced them in half. And so we no longer have basking sharks. They're on the endangered species list, but you might imagine the values. What lost opportunity was there at that time? Well, I would suggest it's well over $1 billion. There's a lot of things we've lost. I remember fishing the salmon at the Columbia River. My limit was 12 when I was a kid. We don't fish very many salmon at the mouth of the Columbia River anymore because that river doesn't support what it does, and you'll know that the same things happened with Cowichan. Roderick Haig Brown used to fly fish and catch 40-pound fish on the Cowichan. Many of us hope that will happen again. I remember having abalone regularly for lunch at every 2-foot tide in the 1980s. Abalone are now an endangered species in the area. Things are changing fast. The money trees, those are white pine on that bottom carrier. We don't have white pine in the area. Now, we're not going to get some of these things back, but thinking about what we've lost and their values going forward is worthwhile. We've also lost some things that people don't always realize as a broad group, that this area was essentially a garden stewarded by the First Nations people who used it to provide their sustenance and food plants. In every village of 1,000 people or more, they were harvesting up to 2 million bulbs a fall. There were 65,000 perhaps First Nations living in this area. That's 250 million camas bulbs every fall, sustainably. Think about this area. Lewis and Clark thought when they came into the Willamette Valley that it was a lake, but it was blooming camas. This area is different. That's Turtleback Mountain on Arcese Island. It's now the top one, but as I'll show you later, it used to be in the mid-1860s mostly open because First Nations burned it regularly. It was their garden where they grew food plants, and it's cleared in now with forests, so some of our forests aren't really natural. Some of those we might actually need to thin to make them look like some of the First Nations gardens historically. The absence of those First Nations gardens is what is particularly rare now. As a consequence, we've turned half of our forest into human use. We only have about 2 or 3% that's anything like the pre-settlement forests. Most of it is privately owned, so the forest that you own is particularly important because you're one of the owners of some of the most important forest lands left. Which you're supporting now, that's an old number, about 170 species at risk in our area. That's made our forest the most imperiled forest, the dry coastal Douglas-fir forests of the area. So we're at a crossroads. That's Mount Suhalem. We can go forward like the top and develop Mount Suhalem in different ways, or we can keep that forest so that people don't lose their viewscape, so that they maintain their opportunity to have recreation. Take in the culinary aspects of the forest. Where do you get chanterelles in a 60-year-old plus forest? We don't want to lose the capacity to buffer against climate change, worsen the kind of issues that are impacting our fish populations, or have further damaged infrastructure. The truth is that you can manage sustainably like this, but really it's questionable if you want to manage for more than just fiber production with the methods that have been used now. And I think you want to manage for more than just fiber production now. Thank you. He's going to throw me off, so I got to keep going. It's also important to think about how hard you're working to restore fish in the area. You've invested millions of dollars in the Stoltz Bluff. You're having Chinook now recovering, but low water in summer is a problem. And the number of wells and water licenses in your area has increased dramatically. You are porting fish during recent droughts, not catching 30-pound, 40-pound ones on a fly. You have many opportunities in front of you. You have the municipal forests that you own. People are already using those for recreational opportunities, and Dave Polster talked about the idea of having some kind of fees that might be gained for that. I'm not saying any particular thing, but you know, when I looked at those parking lots and counted up the 100 cars in Dave's pictures and thought if you could get that 180 days a year for $5 per car, that's 85% of what you're getting as your net revenue in forest budget right now. I map bird populations. That little funny bird with the coattails on, that's a olive-sided flycatcher. Quick 3 beers. That's how birders know it. That's a rare species. You have more of them than anyone else in the world. Stony Hill is one of the best places. Those dark green places are places where you're going to encounter 95% probability of encountering the old-growth bird community. You've got forests which are older, but now supporting very important communities. Those blue areas are the areas that the Coastal Douglas-fir Conservation Partnership, a multi-party group of private citizens, government, academics like me, and others, private landowners, come together and decided that these are the 30% most important properties in the Georgia Basin for conservation going forward. Right there in blue, those are 4 of your 6 mountains. 2 of your mountains lie outside that picture. This is the standing carbon on your land right now, at least as of 1999. And those dark green areas are now worth about $8,900 a ton in the carbon offset market. We could help you harvest that instead of the fiber itself. We've developed tools in collaboration with the Coastal Douglas-fir Conservation Partnership, a multi-party group which is willing to help. Like this tool here, it's a tutorial, has these things mapped in space and says, if you want to save things, but also have a bit of economic value, how would you get it? And we can help you do that spatially. The truth is that we've lost a lot, but we have opportunity going forward. I find places where we can grow bulbs again. But we also know that if we're going to have First Nations gardens back in the area or communities which resemble them, we have to take some of these small patches and probably make them like the big patches historically. If you look at Suhallam or Sikar or others, you see balds. Those balds were probably much bigger. And so the way you get there these days isn't by fire because you have a lot of infrastructure that is vulnerable to fire. But you can get there by careful logging. And so I agree with the mayor. There are ways to do commercial thinning to actually get us back to a state which is closer to the one which supports species which are now desperately trying to keep on the landscape. We can restore old-growth forests in Savannah. I think we can facilitate indigenous and steward culturalship through doing it, and we can help human well-being. A lot of you know of Algonquin Park, one of our best and most famous parks. It's logged continuously. It supports 19 mills. It's logged under very close standards. Go look at their website. You wouldn't notice that that place is being logged, but they do it very effectively. I agree with Dave Polster. I don't think people come to your place to bike and hike through cut blocks full of Scotch broom and blackberries. I think they come for that. I agree with Larry Pinn, who I saw talking to council on the web. I think North Cowichan's in a unique position. You have the ability to adopt a conservation ethic that recognizes the value of forests for its ecological, recreation, and tourist reasons, and those are economically profitable things if well organized. I'd like to encourage you to do that. Myself and other academics are ready to help you if we learn from you what your goals are.
Thank you. Thank you.